There we go. All right. So this is our second special walkthrough and Q&A for Dapp developers. We know this time around we have a lot of people traveling for Evo, and so a fair number of people probably can't be at this call, but we're recording this, so hopefully this creates a clear walkthrough for anybody who's looking at this after the fact to see where all the details are that they need to be aware of for upgrading their Dapps. And before we get into some of the more specialized pieces of that, I think we're going to get a update on where we are in general for the Chang upgrade from Leonard. So Leonard, if you'd share your screen and take us through it.
Yep, just loading as we speak. So, okay, come on.
By the way, also, I will share in the chat for you guys the agenda for this call. In fact, maybe worth just going through that at the top here anyway, too. Okay, Leonard, go ahead.
Yeah, just waiting for it. Okay, so just spend about 30 seconds on where we are in terms of readiness, what we're up to. So, and exactly as we speak, we're at 78% of SPOs by stake have now upgraded to 910. Threshold, as we know, is 70. So we're well on track in terms of where we want to be by stake. Liquidity now we have 28% of exchanges, and thresholds 85%, 85%. We've all just called out logically where we think the next potential hard fork date is the 22nd of August, and the following on is the 27th. I think we just wanted to also focus here in terms of our call to action today. So again, this is from the Intertext webpage. Our big call to action is obviously around Dapps, how we get you guys to progress to an upgrade, focusing on the performance measurements, minimum path to Chang, gotchas, cost calculator, and a migration guide. And we will be adding some links onto the Intersect page. So this is just a high level as to frame where we are. Obviously, this call is really going to focus on the Dapp community. So with that, I stop presenting.
Great. Thanks, Leonard. Appreciate that overview. So now I've dropped in the chat, and I'll just put it in one more time since we have some more folks coming in as well. So you can see that the agenda for this call. I'll also just briefly share my screen so you guys can see it. We'll run through it real fast. All right, there we go. That's loaded up. Here we are. All right, so we're going to go through mostly two major elements. So first of all, we're going to touch on the cost model, and my understanding is that we'll have Chang, who's going to take us through that, and then we're going to touch on migrating Dapp from Plutus V2 to Plutus V3. Those are sort of our two major areas, but then we'll just have a brief period for Q&A so that anybody can ask questions if there's any sort of details there that are left up in the air for you. You can see also that linked in under those two sections, we have a couple of different bits of documentation. There's also a dedicated video walkthrough that Dapp created on migrating Dapp from Plutus V2 to V3. So there's a lot of good information there. If you do have any open questions after this, please do use those. And if you have anybody who who's confused or who has open questions, please point them there as well. So with that said, I think we can jump into our first section. So Chang, do you want to take us into that?
Yeah. So first about cost model for reference grids. So there's a relatively recent change in the ledger about how transaction fees are calculated in Conway. and it was changed from linear to exponential to the total size of reference scripts. So by the way, this is something for Alexei, the Ledger team lead, to talk about, since the Ledger calculates transaction fees, but he's out of office today, so I'm filling in for him. I'll try to explain the backstory and how it works based on what I know. So first of all, in the Babbage era, which is the current era, right? And you probably know that there's no fee charged based on the size of reference scripts. The size of reference scripts simply doesn't count, which is kind of the whole point and the motivation of having reference scripts in the first place. But this is not the right thing to do, because processing each reference script does incur some cost for the node, right? Because the reference script needs to be deserialized. And although we do charge for script execution, we cannot rely on the script execution cost to cover the script deserialization cost, because a script can be very large, very expensive to deserialize, but very cheap to execute. So that's the background. And in the Conway era, the initial plan was to introduce a new costing component, which would be linear to the total size of the reference scripts used in the transaction, because deserialization is roughly proportional to the size of the script. So that was the original plan. But then after the DDoS attack in June, there was concern that a linear cost is not enough, because the size limit for reference scripts is quite large. Unlike transaction size limit, which is 16K, reference scripts limit is like 200K per transaction. So the concern was that a linear cost model would not be enough to prevent similar attacks in the future. So that's why an exponential factor was introduced. So the way it works, I think there's a link in the agenda. You can read it in detail. But to sum it up briefly, the increment is 25K. So for the first 25K, it's linear, and the second 25K is also linear, but it increases at a faster rate, and so on. So my understanding is that if your reference script size total is less than 25K in a transaction, then my understanding is that it would actually be cheaper than the original linear cost model. Only if you use a larger amount will the cost be higher. But of course, the cost is always higher than the Babbage era, because in the Babbage era the cost is zero. Like I just said, there's no cost in the Babbage era associated with the size of reference scripts. Also, by the way, that doesn't mean necessarily that the transaction cost in Conway will necessarily go up, because other parts of the transaction may become cheaper. For example, the Plutus cost model parameters will be lowered, and this will lead to lower execution cost of Plutus scripts. So you pay more for deserialization, but you pay less for execution. And that's it. For more information, you can take a look at the ADR that Alexei just wrote yesterday on the background and how the fees are calculated exactly. And the link is in the screenshot yeah, that's the ADR.
Yeah, so
That's
I've just opened this so you guys can see this. This is what it looks like, and the link to that is in the agenda. I've pinned now the message in the call with the agenda link in it. So in our chat here. So if you open the chat, you should be able to see the link to that agenda now, and you can go in there and find both that page that I just shared and also this script cost calculator there too, which may be useful. So thanks Yang. Any questions for Ziyang on this element of the agenda before we jump over to the next element with Sandeep? All right, then we can jump in with Sandeep to migrating a Dapp from Plutus v2 to Plutus v3. Sandeep, would you like to? We can just stick on the agenda, but also if you have a screen share that you want to do, Sandeep, you can feel free to do that as well.
Yeah, I think screen share will be good. I prepare some slides.
Great.
That
All
would
right.
help. Yeah. For migrating Dapp from Plutus V2 to V3, we used an example Dapp called NFP Marketplace to make it more representative of a Dapp. We have the full source code available, so you can have a look at the source code. So we have from Plutus V2, B3, and B2, B3 all implemented. Regarding the functionality, we have mint, buy, sell, withdraw, representative of Dapp use cases. It uses reference script. This will come in later on because of the cost. First, the effect of Chang hard fork. One of the important changes is introduction of CIP69. Now, validator take a single argument. This simplifies the validation process. We'll see the differences here. This also means that the datum is optional for spending scripts. This enables efficient donation and contribution to dApps like DAO. Now depositing amount ADA to contract is much more simpler than before. And script UTXs no longer need datum to be redeemed. This is really nice. I was looking forward to this. Next, validator changes in Plutus V3. The previous 3-parameter validator now is 1-parameter validator. This structure simplifies the validation process and improves efficiency. We'll talk about this a bit later as well. There are techniques for it. We'll compare B2 and B3 validator formats. This is a B2 validator example. Here you see it takes 3 arguments and returns a built-in unit. Also the check function. Here with the validator logic defined here that returns a Boolean. At the end, the validator returns a built-in unit as a return. For Plutus B3 validator, now that is changed to single argument. Single argument, which is a built-in data, which can be passed into script context, and from there we can extract the redeemer, datum, everything. This makes it much more, the validation process much more streamlined, but at the cost of ugly code, but that could be preference of how you write it. Next, about the compatibility. To maintain compatibility with Plutus B2 scripts, you'll need to set the target version to 1.0.0. The default now is 1.1.0 with the Plutus B3. So to maintain compatibility, be mindful of having this pragma defined. Next, if you are using a parameterized script, then you'll need to specify the PLC version, Plutus language compiler version, to predefine here instead of just using lift code def. This will make sure that it is compatible with the previous one. And for B3, the corresponding one is 110, but you can also use lift code def for the parameterized scripts. Next, decoding datum and redeemer in V3. On this, since the structure, the type structure has changed, we can extract datum and redeemer directly from the script context. For the datum, it can be decoded from the script info in the script index, and for redeemer, we can just use get redeemer. Also an example here for decoding datum from the script context, we can have the script info, and from script info, we can have datum if the purpose is of a spending script. Here's a simple example on this. Next, for redeemer, we can just use get redeemer from the script context. Next, efficiency improvements. Plutus B3, it introduces additional fields related to governance actions. This increases the size, but there's also cost model changes which reduce the cost for other primitives. There's some balance, but in general, we have seen, at least in the example app we have built, script size has increased. To mitigate this, we use a technique called lazy evaluation. The basic idea is from the script context, which is a built-in data, we can convert it to a built-in list, and then whatever we need, we extract out from that built-in list without decoding it fully. This reduces the script size. And we can also take this further by decoding the transaction info and obtaining the required inputs, outputs, while ignoring the unused fields. This is what we call super lazy. Here, if we compare two versions of marketplace, one simple marketplace, another configurable. Configurable, this uses additional scripts to make configuration like, say, configurable fees, fee percentage, or operator addresses, those things, just to show the complexity difference. Here, if we compare the script size for Plutus V2 and V3, just the normal one, there's a big difference. But if we start using lazy decoding, then we can see the difference here, 2448, 2573. Even we can reduce it from Plutus V2. So it is important for your Dapp to see whether you can use lazy evaluation and reduce the script size, just to be mindful of the cost. As a conclusion, I would say the cost model changes very important, as Chang already mentioned. Next, assess the changes from CIP 69. So the parameter changes, lazy evaluation on top of it, and check the script cost, script size, and the fees on this. In general, if your Dapp is working on V2, it should work on V3 as well. But if you are going to make changes, or if you have parameterized contracts, then you will need to make sure that you have proper pragmas set up and updates done. That's mostly it.
Great, thanks, Sindip. So, oh, Chang, yes, please jump in.
Yeah, I just want to make 2 quick points on this. The numbers that Sandeep showed about V2 and V3 script sizes, I think that the number was. I think it's useful to understand that those numbers will vary depending on what your script does and also which language you use to implement it. So if it's a very simple script written in Plutus TX, in the default way, then it is possible that the cost and size might increase noticeably because Plutus TX is by default strict, and it decodes the entire script context from built-in data to term, as Sandeep pointed out, even if you don't do anything with it. And because Plutus V3 has a bigger script context, it will be more expensive to decode. Now, there are ways to avoid it. Like Sandeep said, you can do things more lazily in Plutus TX. Although currently, if you do it that way, it's a little bit less type safe and a little bit more tedious. But we're working on some improvements to Plutus TX that will make it easier. On the other hand, like if you're using another language like Aiken, then I think the behavior should be similar to the super lazy numbers, because Aiken does not eagerly decode the script context, at least not by default. So it depends on what your script does, and and the language you use. Also, if your script is very complex, it does a lot of complex logic, then the strict version might be better because you just decode it once and be done with it, and then then if your script is complex enough, then the decoding cost should not dominate the entire cost of the script. So that's number one. Number two, I just posted a link in the chat. So I also recently wrote a new page in the Plutus TX user guide on comparing Plutus V1, V2, and V3, which would be useful if you want to update your script from V1 or V2 to V3. So it will be useful to take a look at that.
Thanks, Chang. So I'm going to drop that that guide that you just put in there, Chang, also into the agenda here so that people can access it again later if they want to. And Leonard, real fast, you put in 2 comments. Would you like to highlight those points that you were bringing out? I know they've been touched
No,
on. But
no, it's just reinforcing the points. I think we just
Yeah.
want to call out the fact on the pragma is the big one. I think Sandeep and I spoke on this one. Is a big gotcha in terms of remaining on V2, and equally we will update the hard work readiness page with these links as well, because we've got a big call to action there. So you're going to get to that point as well. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, great, thank you. And so now, any questions from the entire discussion that was just had? We have one from Matthew. Is the script context part independent from the current purpose decoded only once, or one time per script? Matthew, you can also unmute and ask your question verbally if you want to. Otherwise, Sandeep, do we have? Are you able to address that question?
I can answer it. I think it is. Yeah, it is decoded only once. Yeah, there's no. I mean, there's no. I mean, unless you. I mean, you can make it decode multiple times, but there's no reason to. By default, it only decode once.
Great. Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat if you can't unmute to speak verbally. So I'm going to ask a question here in a moment. And,
Maybe.
Oh yeah. So did you want to follow up?
Yeah. For the spending script relating to datum decoding, that has to be this spending script. There you get it from the script context, script info. So you need to decode it there. Just a difference on that.
Thanks, Sandeep. Okay. So I've just dropped the guide that Zhang put into the chat. I've dropped that into the agenda now. Also, and as Leonard says, we'll be putting all of these links also into the readiness page so that they're clearly available for everybody. Now, just one more question then for the panel. Say somebody has, is only just now starting to pay attention, right, to the process. They say they missed the July 18th call we did a while back. Obviously, that was recorded, so we can point people back there too. But is there anything else that, just as a refresher, it would be good to give people to keep in mind when they're upgrading their dApps, just to, like I say, if somebody hasn't been paying attention so far, that they might need to pay attention to? Or is this pretty much a comprehensive summary, just to sort of remove any doubt for people? Yeah, Leonard?
I think the key over the last couple of days from working with folks is not to make the working assumption that this is simply an upgrade to 910. I think we need to have folks to execute at least one test. I think it's always worth calling out that we do need to err on the side of caution, but also that there clearly is a separation between the Babbage Prime, which is the reference script upgrade effectively on the Babbage era. That can be, folks probably have mitigated that, but then we have to treat the fact that we're going into that new era and the cost plan, and that's where the delta can be found. And if they follow the guidance here in terms of the pragmas, those kind of gotchas, I think folks will be good, but it would be sensible to test.
Yeah. So the answer there is, don't make the test, make the assessment yourself. And that's just always best practice. So then the final element here, if anybody does have more questions, actually I see one in the chat right now. So we'll get to that first then. So from a question from Manu Padilla, if there are two UTXOs consumed from the same script in the transaction, is it still executed, or is the script, the grammatical structure of the second part of that sentence is a little difficult, is still executed the script 2 times in the same transaction?
Yes, they will be, because if they are both if both UTXOs have script address, then yes, both script will be executed, even if they're the same script.
Okay. Manu, feel free to ask a follow-up question if you want to, and or unmute to ask verbally as well. And anybody else, if you have a question, feel free to throw it in. Manu says, perfect, thanks. Nice. All right, so final piece here. Again, you can throw in a question to get it in while I'm speaking here at the end, but the final piece is a call to action. So as far as just the process of actually getting us to the Chang hard fork, we need dApps to send in their readiness status. So first of all, to make that assessment, to run your tests, to look at this information that's been provided, and then to reach out to the hard fork working group at Intersect to let them know either, on the one hand, it would be really great if you could let us know when you're in progress, so when you've started these assessments, so that we can have a sense of how people are getting along, and then also when you're ready. And this will help us signal how ready we are for the hard fork itself. So as you can see in there, we have the email for the hard fork working group, and you can also just simply tweet at Intersect, and it'll get picked up. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, then we'll close up for the day. One last call for questions. Anybody can drop something in. And additionally, I'll give Sandip, Yang, Leonard, Matt, if you have anything else that you want to follow up with, any last final clarifiers, now's the time. So Sandip.
Thank you. One additional thing, if your Dapp depend on Cardano API, you use that to construct transactions and submit to a different node, then you could have some issues with that. So be mindful on the migration if you are depending on Cardano API. It's different from how you would use normally the front-end APIs, front-end libraries or serialized libraries to construct transactions. But if you're depending on Cardano API, then there could be some concerns. You need to test it.
All right, thanks, Sandip. And we do have one other question that came in from Matthew. The reference script cost, is it only for scripts or any inputs? I don't remember exactly, but is it a generic reference input, right?
According to the ADR Alexi wrote, it's only for reference scripts. It does not count other part of the reference input.
Okay, thanks for that, Chang. And so, yeah, if you have follow-up questions on that, I'd go check out what Alexi wrote up there. And again, that's in the, that's in the agenda, and Leonard has just posted it in the chat too. All right, great. Well, so just one final reminder. Oh, Leonard, do you want to?
Yeah, I guess we will get to a point, it's inevitable, where the actual intensity of the ask to go to the hard fork becomes in the room. So please note that we have effectively have to submit a governance action. We got to go through the approval process, get some to DB Sync, and eventually we do the hard work. We probably are, an order of days from that being potentially possible. So please reach out to us if you need help. And obviously we will be holding more sessions as required, but it really is a case of we are here to help, and it really is a call to action and to ask you to get the upgrade done, tell us you're good, and we can move forward. Thank you.
Yeah. The exchanges and the SPOs are moving with a lot of speed, so we're getting there very, very soon. So yeah, do your tests, assess your readiness, send that info to the hard fork working group, and we will catch you guys probably the next session that we do. So thank you all for attending, and thanks to the speakers as well.
Thanks, everybody.
This recording will be available later, and see you later. Bye. Hey Manu, I just realized that I didn't finish or stop the recording, and it might have been continuing if anybody was here, and just you still are here, so it's continued recording. That's all right. Though we'll cut off the last bit just by editing it, and we'll be posting the recording later on. So I'm stopping that now. No, that's totally.